All right, let's get started. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar on supply chain intelligence using modern analytics. We have some really great speakers and content lined up for you today, but before we dive into all that, I would like to mention that this session will be recorded and we'll be sending out a copy of the slides as well. This session is also in listen-only mode, so if you have any questions, please type them into the questions box below and we'll do our best to answer them throughout the webinar. At the end of the session, there will be a short survey, so don't forget to give us your feedback so we can keep getting better and better. All right, so let's meet your presenters for today. First, we have our very own Chris Foster. He's going to introduce himself at Newcomp. Then we'll have Matt Sauvé from Tableau talk a little bit about data-driven organizations. And last but not least, we'll have Andrew Mardant from Husky Energy, and he's going to talk about data-driven analytics for supply chain management. So with that, Chris, you can go ahead and take it away.
Perfect. Thanks, Alex. Yes, there's all our smiling faces. So that's in the order that you'll hear all of us today, just so you know who's on the line. Really excited. I think what we'll do is we'll start just by kind of introducing, if you aren't familiar with who Newcomp is or who Tableau is, I'll kind of start at the beginning. I know we've got a lot of our really good long time and our new customers on the line as well. So for those of you who aren't familiar with us, maybe I'll do a little introducing and explain who we are and what we do. Newcomp's an interesting company. Newcomp made a bet on analytics when it wasn't cool back in the 90s. And as everybody on the line knows, now we're in the thick of it. We have the benefit of having those couple of decades to really build out a strong client base, build our skills, get really familiar with the tools and technologies that are involved in deploying analytics, in building our methodology. And so, we're not a huge company. Newcomp's still under 100 people. Our head office is in just north of Toronto. We've got an office in downtown Toronto. And then we run our advanced analytics group out of Calgary, which is where both Andrew and I are today. So spread across Canada, we touch clients in the US, in the Caribbean, and so we've got a really broad perspective on just analytics, and that's what our clients come to us for. Really is helping guide tool selection, helping architect these solutions, helping build them and support them, and then obviously enhance them as technology and needs change kind of over time. So the way that we break up our business and into our different practices is in 5 different pillars, and I guess you can think of these as our practices internally, and that's my role at Newcomp, is to run a number of these. So from left to right, kind of your traditional business intelligence, data visualization, something probably most of you are very familiar with. This is reporting and analysis. We have a dedicated practice for budgeting, planning, and forecasting. Tends to be very Office of Finance focused, but building planning models, again, that's kind of the last mile of performance management. Once you run a report, see a problem, you do some analysis, understand why it's happening, you have to go back and replan and reforecast. So it kind of closes the loop from a real advanced performance management perspective. We've got our more advanced analytics group, which the bulk of it is here in Calgary, and then a part of that team is also in Toronto. This is really your math and statistics folks who are building predictive and classification models, really advanced, really cool stuff. Information management, really anything kind of in the curation of data. So this would be, in building ELT or ETL pipelines, storing data, wrapping data governance and quality around that data, cataloging it so that where it came from. These days, everybody wants to build data lakes. Well, without tagging that information, it can turn into a bit of a mess. So, the governance of all of those data assets used to be a lot simpler. We used to deal with a lot less data. Nowadays, as everybody knows, and I'm going to talk about this in a bit, we're dealing with a lot of different types of data. So governance is of utmost importance. And then our labs team. So this is our open source data science team. These are folks who live in open source world. They live and breathe machine learning and AI. They came from computer science. They probably majored in machine learning in school, and now they build statistical models in a less not using maybe the tools that everybody's used to in the past, the proprietary platforms, These are folks that can do it with open source tools. They're used to, they're cloud engineers. They know how to sew together technologies, connect to APIs that are public, whether it's Google APIs or some social media. This is the world that they live in. So that's the way we kind of break up our team. How to work with Newcomp, just because Canada is an interesting market, we have to work in a pretty flexible way. We tend to work, we do the typical project stuff, but we also do more proof of concepts and enablement, pilot programs and that sort of thing. So a lot of different ways to get to know and to work with us. With that, at least now you know where we came from. I'll throw it over to Matt from Tableau Software. Matt's going to give us his perspective, and I know he's got a really interesting perspective. He gets to see analytics working inside a company who, works with the largest and often most innovative organizations around the world. So Matt, I'll throw it over to you, and you can tell us what those organizations do to kind of excel amongst their peers.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate the opportunity to participate in today's session. This is going to be part history lesson and part look to the future. We'll cover a couple of bases here. Really want to start off with a high level of what we see and the drivers behind organizations that are starting to look to data and really how can they thrive in the age of data. So if we can move on to the next slide, please, Chris. So part of the history lesson, as mentioned before, I'm sure everyone on the call here at one time or other had some exposure experience with Blockbuster. And they had a really unique opportunity that in 2000 where they were able to purchase a small company that I think we're all more familiar with now that's grown considerably, called Netflix, for $50 million. I love how this slide says a mere $50 million, as if that's pocket change for organizations. But in context, they had that opportunity in 2000 and they passed on it. And as the slide builds out, Chris, we're all aware that in 2010 that Blockbuster declared bankruptcy. I don't know about the folks on the call, but I haven't seen a Blockbuster in my neighborhood. I live in Vancouver for some time. Funny enough, it did come to my attention that there's still one in existence in Alaska. I'm sure there might be a couple more sprinkled throughout North America. So there's one or two that still exist. But due to some of the decisions that they made, they're no longer in existence as a corporation as a whole. But as we all know, Netflix has grown considerably since that opportunity in 2000 to be part of Blockbuster to now where they're over $150 billion. More importantly, to our conversation today is really we view them as an organization that is truly data-driven. They look at and analyze every aspect of data that their consumers have, really helping them identify where they're going to invest in new content or where they're going to acquire existing content to really drive further adoption from their customer base and continued renewals. So we slide over to the next slide. We can speak to what we are seeing, and I'm sure those folks on the phone today are experiencing them themselves, is the rapid growth in data. And some statistical pieces that resonate. IDC had a report back in November 2018 that the global data sphere will grow from 33 zettabytes in 2018 up to 175 zettabytes by 2025. So considerable growth, and organizations are generating more and more data that they can then analyze and become valuable for their organizations. And Chris, if you can build it out, there's always an interesting data point here that I quite enjoy, but has mixed results based on the community and who you present to. But The Economist made this statement in 2017 that the world's most valuable resources is no longer oil, but data. If we continue on, we've had some third-party organizations that have done some further research. Most recently, when we look at Forrester, they polled a considerable number of organizations, and they came to the conclusion that those organizations that are insight-driven will grow at least 7x faster than the global GDP. And in some cases, versus their competition who are doing very little in regards to investing in technology to do better data analysis at a much faster clip. Continuing on, also polled recently was that 98% of executives indicate that their firm aspires to a data-driven culture. However, only 32.4% report that they are successful. So this is the biggest challenge. There is technology out there. Data, as mentioned before, is growing. There's data on every aspect, so organizations can get the insights that they need to drive better business decisions, but a lot of these organizations are failing. So what gets in the way? If we slide over to the next slide, there's three components to it that I'll ask Chris to build out for us. First one is people. And in this case, oftentimes organizations have a few folks that have quite a bit of skills around data, understand different technologies available to them. Oftentimes the technologies too are limiting for them to then share that content and their insights with other members of the team to really drive forward initiatives that will value the business. The second piece is data. Similar concept is that you might have the folks in-house that have the skill sets, however, they don't have access to all the data, either internally or even external data that's out there for them to bring together to really drive some initiatives forward. And then thirdly, it's around help. Do they have the proper help, both internally from the infrastructures available to them, or the technologies that they have, are they limited? Do they need third-party assistance and expertise to really see those technologies shine and prove value? And this is where Tableau can help in all three aspects. So Chris, we can move forward to our next slide. And then let's move over to the next one as well. So with Tableau, how do we help? There's a few aspects. Firstly, it starts with our mission. And those who are experienced with Tableau and have participated in these types of events before are well familiar with this statement, and it holds true today, 15 years after our entry point into the marketplaces. Fundamentally, our goal is to help people see and understand data. And really the driver behind this is the people portion. We view our customers and prospective customers as highly intelligent, motivated folks who know a lot about data, and we want to provide them the technologies in order for them to succeed. But what we've come to realize as we've grown in this space is that it's more than just technology. There's three real aspects that drive this forward. And Chris, if we can move to the next slide, please. Firstly is around analytics people love to use. We've got a growing user community. We've got over 86,000 customers globally. We have over 500,000 folks that are on our community sites. And then most recently at our last Tableau global conference, we had 17,000 folks that are rabid data people and passionate Tableau folks. So analytics people love to use as a key component to really be a data-driven organization. Secondly is an integrated platform that allows for ease of use for both start and into scale. So like most of our customers, they've started very small, perhaps 10, 15 users within a department, within a line of business, like a supply chain. And through that, we've grown organically to being then the analytics technology of standard for that organization. And then lastly is being a trusted leader in the analytics space. For those that follow Gartner, you'll have recognized that over the last 7 years, Tableau has been in the leaders quadrant, and we continue to do so. We continue to innovate, invest in our technology to be leaders and continue to be leaders in this space. So we move over to the next slide, just to reinforce where we are in this space. What I'd like to highlight in this particular slide of list of notable customers is that none of them are within a specific industry. They're cross-industry, and they've been cross-function with regards to their start point, as mentioned earlier, and then have grown to then be the visual analytics standard for those organizations, be it in communications, retail consumer goods, energy, and resources. A couple examples bringing it back to supply chain that I'd love to share with the group. Firstly, Cisco Systems, we probably all aware of, leverage us throughout the supply chain cycle. And really their focus there was around where are they constructing the equipment that's then being consumed? How do they maximize the delivery of that, knowing that where they build the product isn't necessarily where their end consumer resides, and then mapping their supply chain to maximize those opportunities. drive down costs, and Tableau is a big part of those analysis and driving those cost savings. Other examples that come to mind: Seattle Children's Hospital. They use Tableau to track product inventory, where they were challenged by overstock and expired products. So you can imagine in that sector that expiration dates on a lot of the medicines and products is an important factor. The results of these overstock and or expired product was resulting in 2,000 out of stock alerts that were being requested on a monthly basis. That created an annual rush order of about 20,000 per year. By bringing Tableau in, analyzing the results, making some changes due to the data that was able to surface up, they made some critical changes to their processes, and now are using products before they expire, understanding where stocks need to be within the hospital so that they're properly used, and we're able to see savings of $100,000 per year. And the last local example, I'll use a great Canadian retail brand, Aritzia, that I'm sure most people on the phone are aware of. They might shop for themselves, or maybe some of their children might be fans of that brand. They leverage Tableau within supply chain, amongst other parts of their business. And the big driver there is really identifying their inventory management and getting the right products in a timely manner out to the consumers, be it through their online procurement process or through those that are accessing Aritzia through their brick and mortar stores. And really the driver there behind all the results is a better customer experience. When their customers are arriving at their stores or buying online, they know it's available, they know they'll get it within a couple of days' time, and Tableau is a big part of that delivery. All in with this, obviously there's many more examples that are available around Tableau and supply chain. If you're so inclined, you can do some research yourself. Simply Google Tableau and supply chain. We do have this webpage as part of our overall website that does really dive into some more customer examples, as well as some dashboards that could be of value for those that are attending today's webinar. That's my portion of today, and Chris, I'll pass it back over to you.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it. Yeah, that's good context, and I'm gonna build on some of the things that Matt was talking about there. Specifically, I think everybody understands kind of traditional, the kind of traditional data that we deal with for reporting and analytics. It's kind of, by vendor, by contract, by PO, by invoice, and so I'm gonna take that and say, okay, that's our baseline, and how do we build out from there? There's so much more data at our disposal now, specifically in a supply chain department, but also in any department. So if you're joining from another department in an organization that maybe interacts with SCM, maybe you don't, maybe you have some procurement responsibilities. This is all data that is floating around most modern organizations. So I'm gonna try and frame it and maybe give you hopefully some ideas on, if you're doing reporting right now and you're thinking, yeah, we're pretty good at, building a report. It goes out to everybody every week or every month, or it's exception based, how you can kind of take that to the next level. So here's how I'm going to frame it, and I'll explain what you're looking at, because we're going to go through this kind of left to right. You'll see on the axis on the left, volume and velocity, and on the bottom, variety. These are terms that, this is a chart from Forbes. These are terms that they like to use around big data, very buzzy words, but this is generally the way that these publications talk about quote unquote big data. So forgive me for that, but I think this plot is helpful in thinking about the different types of data that are available to us today. So like I said, structured data on the left-hand side, this is kind of what everybody knows really well. Tableau handles this obviously very well. This is our CRM data. This is our costing data. Everything kind of here on the left-hand side. In the middle, we start to think outside of the box. So this isn't just rows and columns of data anymore. These are semi-structured data. So, it used to be a lot more complicated to access this data, but these days technology and the development and maturity and evolution of databases and technology allows us to start sewing in semi-structured data. So this is things like weather data or a PO, anything that kind of has a hierarchical structure to it, machine-generated data. These are formats like JSON and XML. If you're calling Google's APIs or a weather API. This is the kind of data you're getting back. And to Tableau, maybe you dump this data into a database like Snowflake or something that's built for more modern data management. To Tableau, if you connect it to that data set, again, just looks like a normal relational structure. So really, I think if you're doing the stuff on the left-hand side, this is very, very incremental to be able to start layering in maybe some more non-traditional data like RFID data, for example, right? Sensors along the supply chain. And then if we're going to move even further right, this is where we start to get a little more adventurous, but it's really not that complicated. You don't need to spend, again, a lot of money or hire brand new people to do this sort of thing. So think of what we could do when we start combining all three types of data: structured, semi-structured, unstructured. We could start with our report. So this is something we have built today. Look for trends and anomalies in that transactional data. Then we could layer on weather data or surveys that we've taken or pricing structures, anything that's kind of semi-structured into that data to add some extra context. Then for more context, I guess once we understand the conditions that led to those outcomes, we can look for more context in emails. Maybe we're looking through doing text analytics for understanding the sentiment of people in maybe some notes columns that are coming back in some of our systems. Text transcripts from calls and call centers, et cetera. And none of that is magic. You can't really join, call data to your sales data, but what you can do is use a bunch of public tools that are out there and APIs to go do text analytics and sentiment analysis. Maybe you want to look for unsafe conditions, or you want to look at the packing of a truck. You can train a model to say, this is what a good condition looks like, and this is what a bad condition looks like. And then you can run those videos or data through those APIs, and they will generate a data set that you can layer on to your structured and semi-structured data. So, all of this, because of where technology is today, all this is very accessible, especially with cloud services being so elastic and so forth. So I'm going to try and inspire a little bit. Our friends at CHC Helicopter were kind enough to share some of the dashboards that they have built so far inside of their supply chain group. And I want to just use these just to kind of say, if you're running basic reports right now, here's a real quick way that you could kind of enhance that. So, using things like color and highlighting when thresholds are broken. So if people are working, if we're billing or invoicing more hours per day than what's in a contract or an agreement, we want to highlight those, right? When we're looking at components, for example, in this case, we're using aggregation at a really high level to highlight areas that need attention. So in this case, they're colored by status. This one, the structure of this is what I'd consider more guided analytics. So if you look on the right-hand side, we've got thresholds and filters and flags, attributes that help us get right down to a very specific intersection of data that's of concern. So in this case, if you look in the top left-hand corner, there's a 24 red bar there. So, we picked that group of unavailable orders and components, and we filter down the data set. And now we're looking at a list of parts and work orders down to the pack and the station. And then we can drill through specifically from that line to maybe more data. So we drill through to more data, and now we're seeing all the open orders for that part. And we can view the supply details across our whole distribution network. And that means we can see the open orders, the bins and stock, and here using color on the map, we can view inventory against min and max thresholds. So maybe we should source these orders from another distribution center, another warehouse, right, where they actually have inventory. Here's a pretty creative way. I think this is where Tableau really shines. If you come from kind of legacy reporting and BI tools like I do, this is where you start to, get really impressed. Like Tableau can generate something like this, extremely powerful, way beyond rows, columns, graphs, and this is why we like to have it in our arsenal, because here we can filter, these maintenance workloads to a region, station status, whatever it is we want to see, as well as the time window, and see the maintenance plan, right? In this case, I know it can be tempting to jam a bunch of information onto a dashboard. So in this case, we've put a lot of that in a tooltip, right? So we've added a lot of different context. In a lot of reports, you have to go print some other page just to see these details. So here we have it. We take advantage of this being, you know, on the web and interactive. You hover over something and you get a lot more context for it, right? So that's how I wanted to set the stage, just to say that this is being done. It's being done by, Matt's slide shows a lot of, world-class companies. It's also achievable by, small and mid-sized companies too, because these tools make it so easy. And so, they make our lives easier. We're thankful for them, and hopefully that sets the stage for Andrew too. So I'm going to pass it over to Andrew. Andrew's going to talk about his perspective as somebody who's coming from a supply chain group. He can give you a little overview of his role, but I thought it'd be helpful for him to share what he sees specifically in this domain. So Andrew, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, Chris. Good afternoon. My name is Andrew Martin. I'm a Senior Supply Chain Manager at Husky Energy. Next slide, please. In terms of analytics definition, I just thought I'd kind of put up 3 overviews in terms of how the data can be looked at from a descriptive perspective in order to enable better decision making through predictive analytics and the prescriptive analytics aspects. And I think 2 things for me, from my experience, is just the ability to use more accurate data and the ability to access more data in order to make decisions. And driving actions faster are kind of the key things that I've seen from my experience, and with more confidence. Precursor to analytic success. Really, I listed 4 points there. Subject matter experts on the supply chain processes are really important, and people who understand those processes with a depth of knowledge. The ability to collect data from multiple sources through the analytical tools that Chris and Matt have talked about is critical. And then the use of new data sources, looking and identifying new sources of data is also really important. And lastly, I just put down an open mindset. Through my experience, having the ability to consider new trends and findings from the data that you've accessed is critical. And I wanted to give just some, I know that Matt talked about real life experiences, and Chris did as well. And I just wanted to talk you through a real life example with one of the railways in Canada through their use of data analytics and linked into other technologies such as artificial intelligence. So in the case that I'm speaking to here, the railway transformed data capture to read every rail car at every 40 miles. And what they did was they leveraged existing technology that was historically used to screen and capture the rail car numbers in terms of tracking where rail cars were located. But they looked at the data differently, and they used those locators to actually read the rail car temperature for each wheel on the train. And then based on that, they actually started to identify potential maintenance issues with those cars and proactively start to plan rail maintenance timing and location for those cars to be maintained, and identifying that and communicating with the actual rail car owners who are typically not the railways, and then expanded that program to record the actual sound at each recorder location. And a number of benefits that were realized from that: reduced online rail car maintenance, where they had to set the rail cars aside, which of course impacted operations efficiencies, reduced rail line maintenance, and improved rail safety, because the rail lines were not subjected to additional wear and tear through what's called flat wheels on the train. And so that enabled them to, again, become more efficient, have less downtime on the line, and increased efficiency for the railway. Wow. In terms of sourcing and procurement, for those of you who may not know the category management process or strategic sourcing process in supply chain, spend analytics is a really critical aspect to that. And the use of data analytics allows tracking by supplier, by business unit, by time period, and by subcategory. And what that allows us to do is improve our ability to achieve savings. And the key for that was providing clear visibility to the spend, identifying strategic sourcing opportunities that we may not have been aware of, and building predictive tools to forecast future spend by overall category. And then on the last element, in terms of the use of data analytics, an important aspect for somebody who's in a procurement role is making sure that the spend that you're actually committed to the supplier in the contract is actually what you're spending. And in addition to that, to make sure that you're not overspending what you're approved to spend based on the award value of the contract. And that is becoming more important from a compliance perspective within organizations. So the data analytics tools enable you to identify the total spend, compare that to the actual award value, and then start to put in place some plans to extend contracts, increase the value of the contract. And I think those are kind of the key things from a sourcing and procurement perspective. In terms of spend analytics within the category as well, looking at rogue spend, which is a terminology that's used within supply chain, identifying suppliers who are being used by business units or being used by the company to complete activities that are not under contract, and that spend actually should be going to a contracted supplier. And then, of course, you may have lost savings because you're paying more for those non-contracted suppliers. And in terms of tracking value, that has also become an important element within companies, because supply chain professionals go to market, they identify savings, they negotiate contracts, they take credit for the savings that are to be achieved. And a really important aspect is now being able to go and actually validate that those savings are actually happening for actual spend that's occurring through the purchase order process. And the ability for tools such as Tableau and others to provide that data on a real-time basis, transaction by transaction, is very important for the supply chain professionals. And then around contract lifecycle management, again, it's around analyzing contract spend patterns, identifying when's the most opportune time to go to market, and then prioritizing that schedule. And the ability to use data analytics tools just, again, speeds up the process, makes it less manual, and again, makes it much more efficient for the supply chain team. I think those are good points. Another area that's actually quite overlooked within supply chain and is typically not a well-managed area is rebates and discounts. Typically, those are not really monitored in an organization and are an afterthought as companies or supply chains try to identify what their true savings are for the year. And using an analytical tool set to link those contracts and terms and conditions into a table or schedule, and then being able to actually report on them again on a real-time basis, enables the organization to identify whether or not that contract is performing. Warranty analytics is another area. Again, companies within their supply chain, this is typically an area that is overlooked and can be a significant source of value. So the use of data analytics to identify warranty refunds, tracking them through flagging or identifying those records within the ERP system to identify what should have been claimed as repair costs or operating issues, again, to increase the value achieved through that contract, and then developing the refund claims through the process. Purchase requisition analysis. This is kind of my bread and butter right now. I manage the financial supply chain for a large organization, and the purchase requisition or procure to pay process is a prime area for data analytics within the supply chain or the financial supply chain. I put up some examples in terms of analyzing requisition frequency, looking for trends in terms of same service, same supplier, same week or short time periods. And then again, just looking at the different aspects of those requisitions to understand the trends, and looking at the ability to consolidate the volume into fewer purchase orders. And I think part of this is in our organization is to advance us towards being more of an advisory role to the business units and how to create their purchase requisitions, the strategy around the structure of the purchase orders multi-line purchase orders and requisitions versus single line, time period to be covered, and scope of work. And then also to improve the supplier interaction with the business by reducing the supplier invoicing and payment issues, which sometimes occur because the requisitions have not been designed efficiently. Within the procure to pay process, also looking, as it was mentioned earlier, just around purchase orders. So what kind of purchase orders are being issued? We manage purchase orders in two different types. One's early coded, which indicates that the cost objects have been assigned and it's for a specific AFE or approval for expenditure capital project, or if they're late coded, which allows the requester to select the cost center after the purchase order is issued. And then inside of that, we do a lot of analysis around purchase order cycle times, approval cycle times, and compliance to tax obligations or liabilities. And then in terms of cost object assignment accuracy and contract assignment accuracy, which is really important. And the analytics tool allows us to collect and report and present performance data around the purchase order system and highlight any root cause or issues for exceptions which occur. And then compliance issues in terms of tax and compliance accuracy. Key to the procure to pay process, if those of you who are involved in that or are familiar with it, is we run a three-way match process, which looks at field tickets, invoices, and purchase orders. And within that, we basically manage all of the exceptions which impact the supplier for payment. And the data analysis tool enables us to analyze a massive number of transactions. We process about 120,000 purchase orders and about 1.1 million field tickets during the course of the year. And so that allows us to look at location, supplier, the date the work was completed, the plant codes, very specific details around how that work was completed, and identifying the root causes for those errors and rejections. So without the use of a data analytical tool, it's a very time-consuming manual process, which is subject to data errors and gaps in the data. And so I think those are kind of the key things for the data analytics for the procure to pay process. Logistics and transportation. In addition to this, I think the trend now is for shippers to leverage data analytics, artificial intelligence, heuristics or algorithms to bring together, as was mentioned earlier in the webinar, around unrelated pieces of data. So examples would be weather, as was mentioned before, celebrity postings on social media, seasonal assortment forecasts, and local events or sporting events that are occurring in those areas, which actually impact how you're going to ship product to those final stores. And we look at a lot of different data points in order to be able to do that. On the inventory management side, I think it was mentioned for the CHC example, again, looking at inventory activity, inventory turnover, typical KPIs in terms of aged inventory analytics, which is really important in terms of inactive inventory or obsolete inventory, and determining what that inventory model selection should be, whether it's a min-max system or a fixed period system or any type of inventory modeling approach. And really, again, just assisting with that inventory network optimization and where should that inventory be located across the network. Those are kind of the key things. Warehouse management, really those analytics are focused on the activities in the warehouse. So picking, put away, loading out of the trailers, receiving, and then the equipment travel times within the facility, and the warehouse layout and warehouse slotting. So where should those items be located based on the order profiling in terms of what customers are typically ordering on a standard order, how those products are related to each other. And then combining with artificial intelligence that looks at delivery timing, makeup of products in the load as well, cubic feet and weight, as factors for those loadouts. And now companies are actually using combinations of artificial intelligence, robots, and data analytics to make decisions on optimizing their loadouts and doing it more efficiently than was previously done by people. And those are kind of the areas that I've been experienced with or had exposure to with data analytics.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Andrew. I guess there's some questions that have rolled in for those of you who haven't added any. If you think of any, feel free to send them to us after this. One of the questions, I guess I want to build on something you said, which was being an advisor. Yeah, I'm going to put you on the spot. Be an advisor back to the business. I think that's a cool way of framing it, is that, you know, you happen to be a department and a group that sits very close to a bunch of data that intersects, right? So can you just talk a little bit about what it means to turn back into an advisor, so turn all your intelligence back towards the organization?
For us, we're working with a very focused approach to sharing our subject matter expertise with the business unit. And to do that, we are relying on the data trends, the analytics that indicate how far we are from best practice, and being able to use that data to support our logic as we push back on the business units or the end users to provide alternative ways to structure their transactions.
That's interesting, and I think, you know, all departments are kind of, because of all the data that you deal with kind of esoterically in your group, it's pretty interesting that you can take that and feed it back to the organization as intelligence. We had a couple of questions around that, so I think that addresses it. So thanks very much, Andrew. Appreciate it. I don't know if you had anything else to add, or you're good? Okay, awesome. Well, thanks very much for that. I'll talk quickly. I think it's important. We do, you know, it's great that we are able to introduce you to people like Andrew and to technologies like Tableau and folks like Matt. I think it's really important, just as a community, that we also teach you how to get started. I think it can be, I know firms in our space can be tempted to treat it a little bit elitist and say, this is very complicated. You need us to do all this work for you. These are very specialized skills. I think I'd rather flip it the other way and say, no, this is definitely stuff you can do. And we've built a lot of our enablement plans around that. So we've developed boot camps, for example, and you can check these out on our website. These are super cheap, bring as many friends as you want kind of thing. And we'll teach you about modern analytics. So, you know, we're talking about, you know, Andrew's talking about taking heat sensor and pictures of trains. You know, we'll teach you, if you want to start gathering data like that, what does it take? What's the kind of infrastructure you need in place and architecture? What kind of technologies and, you know, what kind of skills do you need to have on your team? If you want to build APIs against weather data, etc. Predictive analytics. A lot of people like to mention it right up to the C-suite, like to talk about predictive, and we're a predictive maintenance kind of company now. They're going to come to you and ask how they do that, and so we want to arm you with information and resources on how to, you know, fulfill and how to have that conversation with executives who might not understand all the nuances of it. Machine learning. Everybody wants to talk machine learning. What is that? We're happy to kind of describe what a machine learning project looks like, what kind of technologies are out there. The best way to start small and kind of build out from there and all the way to something that you can put into production. This is the world we live in. So a big part of what we try and do as our mandate is to share this information back to the community. When it comes to product-specific training, we have a dedicated, I meant it when I said we're all in on enablement. We have a dedicated training department and group as well with full-time trainers. So if you are, I know these say Markham, which is in Ontario. These are hybrid courses that we run. You can join online virtually, and it's an instructor-led thing. You just happen to not be in the room with everybody. So we're running these all the time. If you're interested in these, obviously reach out to our training group, check them out on our website, add them to your wish list. Let us know if there's something here that's not covered, and we'll try and work around your requirements. We're always here. I think it's important that we're accessible. So myself, you know, in the follow-up, we'll share our direct contact information. I want to say big thanks to Andrew for sharing his time and experience today, and to Matt very much from Tableau. Matt's always good at being an open book and sharing Tableau's perspective and where things are going. I know if he had all the time in the world, he'd share all the really cool things that Tableau's not just experiencing at a high level, but investing in product-wise, vision-wise, platform-wise. So tune in to more of these in the future, and you'll hear us go deep on product level roadmap stuff. And with that, I guess we'll sign off. I know we're ending a little bit early. This has been recorded, so we recorded it. If you have colleagues who aren't able to make it, we'll send that out, a link to that, and make it available to everybody. So thanks very much to everybody, and we'll sign off for now, and we'll talk to you next time.